This lesson is going to introduce you to the lymphatic organs and tissues. This video, at least the remainder of this video, is from a prior recorded lecture. So some of the usual slides that you normally see are missing from this slide deck that's in the video, but you can see those introduction and conclusion slides in the main slideshow uploaded to our unit folder. Okay, so these notes are about the lymphatic system, specifically the organs that actually are necessary for creating and maturing the leukocytes, which are the other term for white blood cells, and filtering and monitoring the fluids in your body. So some major organs and structures that are part of the lymphatic system are the white blood cells, those leukocytes, and lymphocytes. So lymphocytes, if you recall, is the white blood cells involved in acquired immunity and a little bit in innate immunity. So it's specifically B cells, T cells, and natural killer cells are the special term for lymphocytes. In addition to that, there's a bunch of other tissues and organs involved in this. Lymph fluid, lymphatic vessels, organs with lymphatic tissue, so that's spleen, thymus, lymph nodes, and red bone marrow, and we're going to go over all those. The function of the lymphatic system, primarily the way we're going to learn it, is within the context of the immune system, in that it carries out and helps develop your immune responses. But in addition to that, there's some other essential roles it has. For one, it's a really big system for helping to regulate and monitor and pass around your fluids in your body. So the fluids surrounding your tissues are also known as interstitial fluid. So the extracellular fluids, if you recall from way back in Unit 1. In addition to that, because blood is very watery and salty, it only likes to dissolve water. So it's actually really hard for fats that you need for like diet reasons and stuff like that to travel through your blood. So the lymphatic system actually provides a type of fluid that's more friendly to fats. So the lipids in your body tend to travel through the lymphatic system. So we're going to go over that in a little bit. All right. So these are just the notes that were on the last slide, but I'm going to go over some pictures of the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system are these green vessels you see here. One of the things you'll notice about these green vessels is they are not connected to veins or arteries, those classic blue or red things. In fact, your blood vessels are in red, and those kind of work side by side with the lymphatic vessels, which are in green. And what happens is fluids in your tissues flow between your blood vessels and your lymphatic vessels. So your blood vessels are the high-speed freeway for moving fluids around really quick. If you get a cut in your blood vessels, it can be very dangerous. Your lymphatic systems are a slow-moving stream of fluids, so it's not as leaky, or there's nothing moving through it really quickly. So if it gets damaged, it's not the end of the world. And in addition to that, because things are moving through it more slowly, it's a lot easier for white blood cells to hang out in the lymphatic system to check and monitor for disease. So these lymphatic vessels, like I said, kind of run parallel or side by side with the blood vessels. This is a list of a lot of major organs found in the lymphatic system. We're going to not cover all of them, but we are going to cover some of the big players when it comes to developing your organ system or your white blood cells, and also monitoring your white blood cells. And we'll mention the tonsils, but all the other organs I didn't underline, they also play a similar role to the tonsils, the adenoid, the appendix, the Peyer's patches. And the thoracic duct is like a really big tube for passing fluid back and forth between your blood vessels and your lymphatic vessels. Okay, so this is another kind of image of kind of how it works. So the blue and red represents your veins and arteries, the fluids of your blood that are passing through your body incredibly fast because of the mechanical pumping by your heart. But interwoven with this system is your lymphatic tissues, which are going to pick up some of those fluids that are also in your blood through diffusion, and they're going to help monitor what's going on in your body. They're also going to be connected to the bloodways, kind of like on ramps and off ramps in allowing movement of molecules and liquids back and forth between the blood vessels and the lymphatic vessels. Okay, and then again, this is another picture. I like some of the explanations here, but you don't have to write it down. Okay, so this is your official notes for lymphatic vessels. So the lymphatic vessels are the systems that run through your body, collecting and screening lost fluid. So the fluid in your body can be in one of three places. They can be in your blood vessels, at which point they're called blood plasma. All right, so if you don't know what blood plasma is, we haven't gone over the circulatory system, but I'll just kind of draw a quick sketch. So this is a blood vessel. Within the blood vessels, there's these solid bits like red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets, and the fluid surrounding them. So the fluid surrounding and cushioning those cells that they're traveling inside, that's a blood plasma. So if you've ever donated blood plasma or heard of blood plasma being donated, what they end up doing is they spin your blood in a machine, pull out all the blood cells in it, inject that back into you, and they just store the liquid so that they can donate that liquid to anyone who needs it. Okay, when liquid's not in your bloodstream and it may have flowed out of your bloodstream and are feeding the tissues in your organs and other areas of your body, we call that interstitial fluid. But if that fluid collects and collects and collects and collects, it can swell up your tissues and be kind of dangerous if fluid is just going into the tissues and not out of it. So the fluid can get a little bit into the bloodstream, but because the bloodstream is moving so quickly, it's kind of really hard for that fluid to go inside the bloodstream. So instead, it might go through the slower method, which is travel into those slower side streets of the lymphatic vessels. And then fluid that may have flowed into the tissue goes into the lymphatic system. And when it goes into the lymphatic vessels, that same fluid is now called lymph fluid. And it'll flow through the lymphatic vessels and through lymph nodes that we'll explain what they do later, but they're detectives, or they hold the detectives, the white blood cells. And it'll eventually turn back into the bloodstream in a later section. It's called the thoracic duct near your heart, but we're not going to go into that one too much. But basically, that same fluid is going to have a different name based on where it's located. Okay, so this is just another image of that, or not, this is not another image. So just a heads up, so blood vessels, what distinguishes blood vessels from lymphatic vessels is the fact that blood vessels, because they're powered by the heart, they're extremely high speed, and they move fluids around incredibly fast. But it also means any cuts within that high-speed freeway can be very dangerous. But you're going to use your bloodstream when you want to have materials travel through your body fast. So white blood cells will simultaneously go through your bloodstream as well as your lymphatic vessels, depending on if they need to migrate quickly. Inflammation actually helps white blood cells move through the blood vessels much more quickly into the tissues, etc. But your red blood cells especially go through your blood vessels because you need to get oxygen to your body fast. Lymphatic vessels, though, they are not powered by a heart. What they do is they just happen to be hanging out, and when you move your body around, then they'll take advantage of the fact that when you're moving your body around, you're unintentionally squishing the vessels, and that's going to help push things through. Sort of imagine a pipe with there's no flow, but when you step on that, like a soft pipe, you can see the liquid squish to one side. That's what's happening in the lymphatic vessels. There's valves, little doorways in the lymphatic vessels to make sure that the tissue, the fluids are moving one way so that it eventually travels throughout the lymphatic vessels and eventually towards the bloodstream again. And because it's slower flow and lower pressure, and you can feel the lymphatic system in action because when your feet and arms go numb and you lose, quote, circulation, generally speaking, you're actually losing lymphatic flow And that lack of movement of fluids in your tissues is that blood rush you feel when you start walking up and moving around, because your lymphatic system is back in action and sending liquid back to your blood. Okay, and because it's a slower movement and a little bit more lipid friendly, it's a little bit less watery and salty than blood, then any fat you have typically travels through the lymphatic system. Fat in your blood vessels can be very dangerous because, like grease in a water pipe, it can clog your blood vessels up, which is what happens to people that have what's called atherosclerosis, which is a condition where your blood vessels get clogged. You get that when you're older or have genetic problems. Okay, so you can see an example. This is what happens when your lymphatic vessels are not draining properly. What happens, and not collecting fluids from your tissues properly, what happens then is fluids go into these tissues and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and swell up. If you really want to see some incredibly gross pictures, just Google lymph vessels or lymphatic vessels. I'll use lymphatic and lymph interchangeably. Block. Those organs get swollen and gnarly and huge. It's really it can be really dramatic. Okay, I didn't post them on this video because the video is sent home, but if you were in my class, I would have definitely shown you guys a picture. Okay, so if you notice within the lymphatic vessels that fluid is going through, the lymphatic vessel fluids are gonna eventually pass through these little clusters. Here, let me just draw them a little bit brighter. Those little clusters are called lymph nodes, and these lymph nodes are organic tissue structures, so organ tissues that hold not just the lymph vessels where the fluid is flowing through, but they are sites where a lot of white blood cells hang out, particularly the antigen-presenting cells like macrophages and dendrocytes and B cells, and your T cells and B cells all hang out there. Because what they're doing is they're hanging out there in search of antigens for potential pathogens that may be present in your body. And because you have this fluid system that's kind of slow, so it gives plenty of time for screening, you can put all your white blood cells there, because we know eventually any fluid in your body, whether it's in your regular tissues, your interstitial fluids, your bloodstream, etc., they're eventually going to enter the lymphatic system and pass through a lymph node. And that gives the lymph nodes opportunity to populate if they attach to the antigen. So then you'll get that plasma cells from the B cells being formed, the helper T cells getting divided and activated, and then the cytotoxic T cells getting divided and activated. All that occurs because you have these stations that make it really easy as a checkpoint to check for disease. Generally speaking, when you go to a doctor's office, you're going to know the doctor tends to do some weird stuff. They're going to feel you up on the bottom and upper edges of your neck and jawline. They might feel behind your ears. They might feel around your armpits and sometimes even in your groin region. And what they're feeling for is swollen lymph nodes. They're not just poking you in weird areas for no reason. These lymph nodes, if you have an infection, right, your B cells and T cells activate and macrophages activate and start making more of themselves. And as a result, there are going to be more white blood cells than normal in the lymph nodes, and those lymph nodes are going to swell up. So if the doctor feels a large lymph node, it's going to be a sign that you may have an active infection. There are several organs that are also in the lymph node family. So they're still lymph nodes, but because they're so large and they're located in weird areas, we give them a special name. So one of them is tonsils. Actually, tonsils are called lymph nodules. They're like a weaker form of a lymph node. There's also some other ones called pyre patches and adenoid and stuff like that. We're not going to really go into that. But just know lymph nodes may not have an official name because there's tons of them clustered around your body. But special lymph node type tissues that are very large and in specialized area, like your tonsils, will have a unique name. Because you have so many lymph nodes, loss of one lymph node isn't the end of the world. You can still survive. Like, you can lose your tonsils and your organ system will still work and your immune system will still work. But it does mean you lost a guard station in one area of your body, so you're more likely to get an infection in that one area of your body. So if you lose your tonsils, you're more likely to get a throat infection over time. Your spleen especially is a massive lymphatic organ, meaning it has those lymph node type tissues for screening your blood, your lymph and your blood. It actually plays dual roles. So it's a big lymph node type organ, and it actually plays a really critical role in your circulatory system. So it's a really big site for your B cells and T cells to populate. But in addition to that, it works with the blood vessels in addition to your lymph vessels, and they actually remove and filter out old blood cells. If you lose your spleen, you're going to be more at risk for infection, and you also tend to have not as clean blood. However, again, you can lose your spleen and still be alive because it's a lymph node type tissue, so there's many lymph nodes in your body. In addition to that, the screening function that it has is also performed by your liver, so you have a backup option in the event you lose your spleen. Now, the thymus is a really big organ in terms of control, maintenance, and regulation of your immune system, because it plays a really huge role in your T cell and regulating your T cells. So it's really important for acquired immunity and maintaining that. So the thymus is actually clustered here between your lungs and just on top of the heart, right beneath the sternum. So it's just sitting kind of on top of the heart. Its job, this got blocked off by the picture. Let me type it in. It contains large number of T cells, B cells, and macrophages. But the biggest role it has is it plays a massive role in screening and maturing your T cells and ensuring your T cells are the correct ones that should be in your body. Your thymus is at its peak at puberty. And actually, that's also your peak immune system with acquired immunity peaks in your early 20s and late teens. It's developing as a baby, and it's developing through childhood, and so it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and peak in your late teens, early 20s. And then after that, it slowly gets replaced by useless fat tissue. And by the time you're 60, active thymus tissue that actually helps your immune system is down by half. And by the time you're 80, useful thymus tissue is gone, and your immune system is pretty trashed, especially in your acquired immune system. It's a lot weaker than it was before. So you still have acquired immunity because you have that history of B cells and T cells, but it's not going to work at nearly the level you can. Imagine this is your 20s, and you have your immune system, and your immune system peaks really high in your 20s and then slowly drops off over time after your 20s. Okay, so how are T and B cells made, and how do they get regulated? So all white blood cells are made by your red bone marrow, which is right inside those bones you have in your body, long, flat, irregular, in the spongy bone. And those red blood marrow tissues are going to help produce red blood cells and white blood cells. For a lot of white blood cells, like macrophages, natural killer cells, mast cells like basophils and eosinophils, they'll just mature in the red marrow and get dropped off into your bloodstream and lymphatic vessels. However, your B cells and T cells, when they get made, initially they have the potential to kill you, because the way they're made is they make B cells and T cells randomly to have just about any antigen potentially attack anything, including viruses you may never seen before in your body, and potentially even your own organs. So what you're going to have to do is take those B cells and T cells and develop them in special sites to make sure you get rid of anything that might attack you, and you only keep the T cells and B cells that will protect you against diseases that aren't, and tissues and antigens that aren't naturally found in your body. This process is called self-tolerance. So when T cells and B cells are made, the receptor is randomly put together so that you have the potential to attack billions, maybe even trillions of different things you've never seen before. So, and then at that point, because you want the human body wants to be able to have some protection against novel viruses, against new viruses and new bacteria. Otherwise, I mean, COVID-19 is kind of scary, but imagine if our bodies were only able to protect us against stuff that our ancestors have seen. Then there'd be no way any of us would be able to be protected against COVID-19. So the fact that your immune system basically makes every possible attack thing, but that's a good thing. But because it makes every possible attack thing, so a bunch of B cells that can attack many different, one special B cells for every possible different type of thing, every once in a while they'll have stuff that attacks you or attacks harmless environmental stuff, and you want to get rid of that so your immune system isn't out of whack and destroying you. Okay? So you'll need the screening process to remove that. T cell regulation is far more strict than B cells because if you recall, B cells need helper T cells to really get regulated, to really proliferate. That was in the last notes. So if your B cells are still activated, but you don't have any T cells, those are all screened out, your B cells won't be hyped up. They won't make as many, they won't damage you as much. So in this case, what happens is this initial stem cells are making your blood cells, your white blood cells. They make just about any B cell and T cell possible, including some that might be dangerous to you. Then what they're going to do is keep the B cells in your bone marrow and send the T cells to your thymus up by your heart. The thymus is going to really take its sweet time to making sure any T cells you got that are going to damage you are gone. Your B cells, on the other hand, are going to hang out in the bone marrow. And if you happen to have a B cell that reacts with your body, it's going to do one of two things. It will either kill that B cell or it will try to modify that B cell so it stops attacking your own body. With a T cell, on the other hand, what will happen is if it reacts at all with your body, your thymus will induce it to die, will make it die. And sometimes even if they know there's something in your body that may be, you may not want to attack, it will sometimes form a special kind of T cell called a suppressor T cell that will help suppress any other T cells and B cells that may react against something you don't want to attack, like something in your body or something found in your environment every day. Because you don't want to attack things found in your regular environment. That's how you get allergies. Pollen is everywhere. If your body is going hyped up on pollen, that's going to screw you over because then your body's always acting like you have a disease. Now, once you screen out the dangerous B cells and T cells, you now have what's called naive T cells and B cells. So these are the T cells and B cells that are naturally patrolling your body, and if they go through your lymphatic tissues. When they activate through binding an antigen, so they're like, oh, this pathogen is in the body, that's when they're going to quickly convert to what's called effector B and T cells. So effector is the general name we give B and T cells that do the job of protecting you. So those memory B cells, those plasma B cells that are making the antibodies, those cytotoxic T cells and helper T cells, those are all effector cells. That's just the overall name we give them. And they will only occur once your screened out original B and T cells click onto an antigen to go, oop, the disease or pathogen is here. Okay, so this is just the last couple slides all kind of in one place. But this is a nice flow chart, and I highly suggest you write it, or not highly suggest you write it down. Just write it down. So this is the basic idea. You have your initial B or T cells that can include dangerous cells that may attack you, and you're going to screen to remove the dangerous dudes. Bs will be screened in the bone marrow. T will be screened in the thymus the thymus, T for thymus, okay? B for bone marrow. Hopefully that helps you know where it's developing and maturing. Once it's matured and stuff, we still call them naive because they're not actively attacking a disease, but they're going to be allowed to leave and start patrolling your body. And when it binds an antigen through attaching to an antigen presented by an APC, by an antigen presenting cell like a macrophage or dendrocyte or a B cell, or just attaching to the antigen found on the surface of a cell's MHC molecule or in the bloodstream or wherever, as soon as it attaches to an antigen that matches that B or T cell, because remember, all B and T cells are particular to attack one thing. So any naive B cell is looking for the antigen that it is trained and good to go to attack. And if it does, that's when it's going to make a lot of versions of itself that are going to do the job of making the antibodies, of attacking cells through the cytotoxic T cells, of helping to promote and expand the immune system through helper T cells. And just a heads up, your environment has backup if you have something besides things in your body that is constantly in your body, like food you eat, like peanuts and stuff, or pollen. The hope is that with enough exposure, your body will slowly recognize that, oh, this is something I shouldn't be attacking. And in response, it's going to make special kinds of regulatory, known as suppressor T cells, to stop and block off your T, B cells, and macrophage responses. So these suppressor T cells work when your infection is over with, there's no more virus, but they also play a really huge role in recognizing allergies and preventing them with repeated exposure. So that's why peanut challenging sometimes is one way doctors use to reduce the severity of someone's allergies by giving that person a little bit of the thing that they're allergic to every single day or every few days to make sure that person makes enough suppressor T cells to stop the allergy reaction. So you're going to try to screen out T cells and B cells are dangerous, but if they don't happen to get screened out, in the future, you might instead make some suppressor T cells that can block off, ultimately, the reaction you may have by blocking off helper T cells and any T cell in general. And remember, helper T cells, by blocking that from working, you're going to also block off B cells from working as well. What happens if you don't have these things happen? Well, if you don't prevent B cells and T cells that attack you from disappearing, those B cells and T cells are going to stick around and eventually destroy your own organ tissues. So, for example, arthritis attacks when B cells are made that attack the tissues in your joints, so your knuckles and joints start getting achy and swollen. Diabetes can occur when your body starts attacking your pancreas cells that make insulin that help regulate your blood sugar. And multiple sclerosis is when your immune system makes T cells that attack your myelin sheath that helps your neurons work. So lack of screening for self-tolerance can lead, especially over time as you age, to some dangerous things. And actually, a lot of the treatment for these diseases can sometimes suppress your immune system, which is why people who take these drugs for these diseases may be at higher risk for COVID-19. Another situation that may happen is if you don't get repeated exposure to environmental things, your body may not learn to stop overreacting when exposed to it. So in this case, a lot of allergies occur when you maintain B cells that have the potential to attack things in your environment that you shouldn't want to attack, like peanuts or pollen or dust or saliva if you're allergic to a cat or dog. And when those suppressor T cells aren't made to block off your B cells from overreacting, those B cells are going to release antibodies that kick off histamine release. And if you remember histamine, Histamines are the dudes that create inflammation, and that's why your nose gets runny, you feel a lot of pressure in your face, and sometimes in severe cases, you can blow up because your blood is swelling, your blood is releasing so much inflammation factors that your tissues start to swell up. One of the interesting side things is in the early 2000s, for instance, there was a trend where parents were encouraged to never expose their babies to anything that could be potentially dangerous, like shellfish or peanuts. And now we kind of see a correlation of a lot of kids having a higher amount of these allergies in areas that had that culture. Likely because you're not making those suppressing T cells. All right, that concludes the notes. Move on to the rest of today's activities. Bye.